Monastir, known today as Bitola in North Macedonia, was a city of immense strategic importance during the First World War. It sat at a vital crossroads in the Balkans, a region torn apart by conflict and competing empires. The city was a key transportation hub, controlling major roads and railway lines that connected the Aegean coast to the heart of the Serbian interior. For any army operating on the Macedonian front, holding Monastir meant controlling the flow of troops, supplies, and information. Its position made it a gateway, a prize that both the Allied powers and the Central Powers desperately wanted to possess. The city's capture or defense could dramatically alter the balance of power on this often overlooked but brutal front. The city's significance went beyond just logistics. Monastir was a symbol. Before the war, it had been a bustling cosmopolitan center within the Ottoman Empire, home to a diverse population of Slavs, Greeks, Albanians, Turks, and Jews. Its capture by Serbia in the Balkan Wars had made it a symbol of Serbian national ambition. For the Allies, particularly the French and the Serbs who had been driven from their homeland, retaking Monastir became a point of honor. It represented a tangible victory, a step towards liberating Serbia and pushing back the Central Powers. The city was more than just a pin on a military map. It was a beacon of hope and a focus of intense national pride for the beleaguered Serbian army and its allies. The Macedonian front itself was a complex and grueling theater of war. Established in late 1915 after the Allied expedition to save Serbia failed, it stretched for hundreds of kilometers across treacherous mountainous terrain. Here, a multinational Allied army, known as the Armée d'Orient, faced a formidable force of German, Austro-Hungarian, and Bulgarian troops. The conditions were appalling, with soldiers battling not only the enemy but also extreme weather, from scorching summer heat to freezing winter blizzards. Malaria and other diseases were rampant, earning the front the grim nickname the Gardeners of Salonika, as soldiers spent more time digging trenches and graves than fighting. Monastir sat right in the heart of this difficult landscape, a fortress city that would require a monumental effort to conquer. By early 1917, the stage was set for a major confrontation over the city. The Allies had managed to capture Monastir in November 1916, but their hold was precarious. The Central Powers, particularly the Bulgarians, occupied the commanding heights of the mountains that encircled the city to the north and east. From these dominant positions, they could rain down artillery fire on the Allied forces and the city's inhabitants below, making life a living hell. The Allies knew that to secure Monastir properly and to prepare for a larger offensive, they had to push the enemy off these strategic hills. This necessity would trigger the bloody and often forgotten Battle of Monastir in the spring of 1917. The forces arrayed for the Battle of Monastir were a complex mix of nationalities, each with distinct goals. On the Allied side, the primary offensive force was the French Armée d'Orient, commanded by General Maurice Sarrail. Sarrail was an ambitious and politically connected commander who was under pressure to deliver a significant victory on the Macedonian front. He aimed to break the stalemate, push the Central Powers back, and create an opportunity for a larger breakthrough that could potentially knock Bulgaria out of the war. A decisive victory at Monastir would justify the immense resources poured into this secondary front and boost his own military reputation, proving the value of his often criticized command in the Balkans. Fighting alongside the French were the Serbs, the Russians, and the Italians. For the Serbian army, this battle was deeply personal. Having been forced into a harrowing retreat from their homeland in 1915, they were fighting to reclaim their country piece by piece. Every yard of ground gained was a step closer to home. Their primary objective was to secure Monastir, a Serbian city, and use it as a springboard for the eventual liberation of all of Serbia. The Russian Expeditionary Force, sent to support their Slavic allies, shared this goal, while the Italian contingent aimed to secure their own strategic interests in the Balkans and tie down Austro-Hungarian forces that might otherwise be deployed against them on the Italian front. Opposing them were the well-entrenched forces of the Central Powers. The bulk of the defenders were soldiers of the Bulgarian First Army, commanded by General Dimitar Geshov. The Bulgarian soldiers were tough, experienced fighters, accustomed to the harsh mountain terrain that was their greatest ally. Their main objective was purely defensive, to hold their commanding positions in the mountains overlooking Monastir at all costs. They had spent months fortifying these heights, digging deep trenches, and creating machine gun nests with excellent fields of fire. For Bulgaria, holding this line meant protecting their own borders and maintaining their grip on occupied Serbian territory, which they viewed as historically Bulgarian. Supporting the Bulgarians were elite German units. While fewer in number, the German troops provided crucial expertise, leadership, and heavy artillery support. Their goal was to stiffen the Bulgarian defense and ensure the stability of the Macedonian front. A collapse here could have disastrous consequences, opening up a southern front that would threaten Austria-Hungary and even Germany itself. For the German High Command, the Macedonian front was about containment. They needed to keep the large Allied army bogged down in the Balkans, preventing those seasoned French and British divisions from being redeployed to the decisive Western Front in France and Belgium. The battle was a test of endurance for both sides. The Allied offensive began in March 1917 with a massive artillery bombardment intended to soften up the Bulgarian defenses. The primary target was the formidable Red Wall, a fortified ridge, and the heavily defended hill 1248, which dominated the landscape north of Monastir. General Sarail believed that a powerful, concentrated assault could shatter the enemy lines. French and Serbian infantry divisions were tasked with the near-suicidal mission of advancing up the steep, rocky slopes under a hail of machine gun and artillery fire. The initial stages of the fighting were incredibly brutal, with soldiers clawing their way forward yard by bloody yard, only to be pushed back by ferocious Bulgarian counterattacks. The fighting for Hill 1248 became the epicenter of the battle, a maelstrom of violence and courage. The French colonial troops, the Zouaves and Tirailleurs, launched repeated assaults on the Bulgarian positions. They faced a determined enemy dug into stone and earth fortifications that were difficult to destroy with artillery. The terrain offered little cover, and every advance was made across open ground raked by fire. The battle devolved into a grim series of close-quarters struggles, fought with bayonets, grenades, and trench clubs in a labyrinth of trenches and dugouts. The casualty rates were horrendous on both sides, as control of the summit and its surrounding slopes swayed back and forth in a deadly tug-of-war. Despite their incredible bravery, the Allied forces could not achieve a decisive breakthrough. The Bulgarian defenders fought with tenacity, using their superior positions to their full advantage. They launched relentless counterattacks to reclaim any ground that was lost, preventing the French and Serbs from consolidating their gains. The weather also turned against the attackers, with heavy spring rains turning the battlefield into a sea of mud, making movement and the transport of supplies nearly impossible. The initial momentum of the Allied offensive quickly bogged down into a bloody stalemate, mirroring the attritional warfare that defined the Western Front, but in an even more unforgiving mountainous environment. By late May, after more than 2 months of relentless fighting, it became clear that the offensive had failed. The Allies had managed to capture some ground, including the Red Wall and parts of Hill 1248, but they had not broken the Bulgarian line. The cost had been staggering, with the Allies suffering over 14,000 casualties and the Central Powers around 6,000. General Sarail was forced to call off the attack. The Battle of Monastir ended not with a bang, but with a whimper of exhaustion. The Central Powers still held the most critical high ground, and their artillery could continue to shell the city below, ensuring that the stalemate on the Macedonian front would continue. The immediate aftermath of the 1917 battle was devastating for the city of Monastir and its people. Although the Allies held the city itself, the Bulgarians and Germans still occupied the mountains that formed a natural amphitheater around it. From these positions, they subjected Monastir to a relentless and systematic artillery bombardment that continued for months. Daily life became a terrifying ordeal. Schools, hospitals, churches, and homes were reduced to rubble. The once vibrant streets became deserted, pockmarked with shell craters. The civilian population suffered terribly, with thousands killed or wounded, and many more forced to flee as refugees, abandoning their homes and everything they owned. For the soldiers on the Macedonian front, the failure of the offensive led to a deep sense of despair and futility. The immense sacrifices had resulted in little strategic gain, and the prospect of a breakthrough seemed more distant than ever. Morale plummeted, particularly among the French troops, who felt they were trapped in a forgotten war far from home. The failure contributed to the dismissal of the ambitious General Sarail later that year. the front settled back into the grim routine of trench warfare, a static and attritional conflict where the main enemies were often disease, boredom, and the harsh climate rather than direct combat. The great Allied victory that was supposed to happen in 1917 would have to wait. In the grander scheme of World War I, the Battle of Monastir is often overlooked, a footnote compared to the colossal battles of Verdun or the Somme. However, it was not without significance. The battle successfully tied down a large number of Bulgarian and German troops who could not be used elsewhere. It kept the pressure on the Central Powers' southern flank and demonstrated the resolve of the Allied coalition, particularly the reborn Serbian army. The fierce fighting also bled the Bulgarian army, wearing down its strength and morale over time. This attritional effect would prove crucial a year later, contributing to the final collapse of the Bulgarian forces. The ultimate legacy of the battle was realized in September 1918. Using the ground gained in the costly 1917 fighting as a starting point, a renewed Allied offensive, this time spearheaded by the French and the Serbs, finally broke through the Bulgarian lines at the Battle of Dobro Pole. This breakthrough was swift and decisive. Bulgaria was knocked out of the war within weeks, triggering a domino effect that led to the collapse of the Austro-Hungarian and Ottoman empires, and ultimately, the end of the First World War. The forgotten struggle for the hills around Monastir, as costly and inconclusive as it seemed in 1917, had laid the essential groundwork for that final, war-winning victory.